event using AI to fight online disinformation in European elections. I'd like to thank the Press Club for having us today and for helping us live streaming the event online for other people to watch. So my name is Eline Chivo. I'm a senior policy analyst at the Center for Data Innovation. We're a non-partisan, not-for-profit public policy think tank focused on the intersection of data, technology and public policy, and we basically welcome any area and many make a tool in this fight against disinformation. The content they're exposed to. And second, a number of policy approaches can be envisaged in the sense that they can provide a good response to that complex issue as well. And we probably are going to look rather closely at the code of practice, which some of you have heard of and followed, which is a deal, some kind of a governance, a self-regulatory approach between the Commission and several signatories from the tech industry, Facebook, Google, Twitter, and Mozilla. And at the moment, the Commission is evaluating the progress and the extent to which automated tools and self-regulation can counter fake news, especially trying to avoid introducing new distortions to public discourse or stifling freedom of speech. What we see in our work is that platforms are seen as the cause of the problem. It is good to emphasize that they can provide an opportunity to tackle the problem. It's a chance at how we can tie all these issues together rather than keeping them apart. Now, without further ado, introduce our wonderful panelists today. Thank you very much for joining us. So we have Paolo Cesarini, which is head of the unit responsible for media convergence protection risk. Henrik Jeppesen, Director of European Affairs at the Center for Democracy and Technology. The center is based in Brussels and Washington, and you're shaping technology policy with a focus on the rights of the individuals and democratic values. And then we have Milan Zubicek. You work at as the EU Public Policy and Government Relations Manager at Google. Thank you very much. I'd like to start by asking each one of you how you see the journey and the context of countering disinformation, the past, the present, and the future. How could you comment on what it means in the context of the elections and how you see the progress that has been made? Perhaps, Paolo, you could start, if you'd like.
I can start, yes. For the users, the context that response actor involved in this joint effort. Well, it's as a commission to tackle them too late. We on time when we look at the fast approaching electoral campaign or not. I would argue that we have been acting pretty fast. I mean, the awareness of the threats that are built into the different strategies and the diversity of the strategies themselves that are carried out in order to, pollute the public space, the information spheres where public opinion takes shape and where citizens forms their own ideas, and these ideas that then are translated into voting decisions. Well, this awareness became obvious not too long ago. Let's say it has been the presidential election in the United States, the Brexit, communication, digital communication, access of public consultation, because the problem is complex. It touches everybody. So it's difficult to design solutions or to design line of action for the Commission without having a wide consultation. And wide consultations takes time. Which means that if you look in the perspective, in the time perspective, initiative to result in a number of quite visible outcomes, starting with the report of the high-level group, with the communication 2019 and 18, with the agreement by the major actors in the online space of a code of practice, which was which was agreed in September 2018, and with an action plan that follows suit immediately after in December of the last year. So if you look at the rhythm at which this initiative had been carried out, I don't want to defend the Commission as a point of, of honor, but it is indeed quite impressive, taking into account the complexity of the machinery and the complexity of the phenomenon that we are trying to tackle. So now we are in the middle of the implementation of a code of practice, which has, which is important, which contains commitments for the main actors in this space, and the ball, I would like to say, it is now in the camp of the signatories of the code of practice. We are monitoring and we are trying to harness the best of this, of what these self-regulatory policies are designed to produce.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of food for thought in what you said. I'd like to perhaps ask you that comment on the fact that indeed it is a leap of faith. However, this investment from the went from 1.9 million euros up to 5 million euros to counter disinformation, to sort of implement a rapid alert system and etc. Is that enough next to how much Russia pro-Kremlin campaigns are investing? But perhaps we can get back to that a little bit later, because I'd like to give the floor perhaps to Milan, if you'd like to comment or follow up on all those thoughts. Thank you.
Well, my note accessible and for everyone, specific around the elections and around disinformation, because if our products are serving users disinformation, then we are clearly failing this mission. Around disinformation, because if our products are serving users disinformation, then we are clearly failing this mission. And I will speak a little bit about the code of practice and how we are meeting our commitments made in the code, if I may. But before I go to detail, I think it's very important to say that we are really proud of this code, and we've heard some criticism, but we really feel that all the signatories together with the Commission made a very important step in this sense. It's the first such a code globally, and the commitments there are quite concrete, and all the signatories are very much committed to meeting these. So the way the code of practice is structured, there are 5 areas. Not all the signatories had to sign for all the relevant parts, but Google did sign to all the 5 parts of these commitments. And recently we publish our baseline report for 2018. It has already been published by the European Commission. You can find it on their website, and I would recommend everyone to really read through. I think Elin might even share some details after, hopefully, with as a follow-up. And it's really interesting, not just by Google, but also by other signatories, including the European Commission's commentary. So the first part focuses on the scrutiny of ads, and in the baseline report we are highlighting how we are scrutinizing the ads placement, how we are fighting against misrepresentation on ads, how we are fighting against unoriginal content that is served by the advertisements, and also we are providing some basic numbers on how many advertisements, be it AdWords or AdSense, we have removed, how many publishers we have demonetized, and why we have done so. So there are specific commitments met with specific metrics and numbers that we are publishing and going to publish going on. The second, I think, one of the key areas of this code is the political advertisement. Here, a big chunk of our work related to the EU 2019 elections is related to publishing a transparency of political advertisements. We are still working on this, but it will be available before the elections. And this transparency basically will show what are the political advertisements out there. So everyone will see a registry of creatives. So all the political advertisements will be available on this website, and every user from the European Union will be able to see what kind of advertisements they have been served based on what metrics, and also who and how much has been paid for these advertisements. And this will be coupled with a very vigilant sort of a verification process to make sure that everyone who is paying for these political advertisements are individuals or organizations coming from the European Union. And this will be very simple sort of checking even IDs and passports or numbers of registration, just to make sure that really there are no foreign actors serving or ordering those political ads.
Sorry, will you be able to see who they target?
Yes, there will be. It will be available on the targeting of political ads. We are much more strict than on a regular political advertisement. There are only 3 areas or 3 metrics based on which political advertisement can be served. It is based on age, gender, and location. And this all will be available, so every user will be able to see why they've been served this kind of advertisement. The third part is on the integrity of services. Basically, it outlines how we are work to implementing the code and these commitments, including, again, policies, clear policies against misrepresentation, in Google News, on other services, engagement abuse, and in general, how we are fighting and how we are protecting the integrity of all the services that are that Google provides. The fourth one is about empowerment of consumers. Here, the big part of work focuses on our work with fact checkers. I think we will have more time to come across this, because I think it's a very important aspect, and I think it's going to be very relevant when we will talk about the relationship between AI and the sort of human review, because I think we will get to the point of debate when we will see that AI is very powerful tool for some things, but is not a silver bullet, and it doesn't understand the context, which is very important. So we always need human who understand the context, who can contextualize the information. And the last part is dedicated to our cooperation with researchers. Again, I'm very happy to go through some details about how we are empowering the research community, the projects that we are doing together with researchers, data sets that we are providing to certain researchers and specific researchers, just really to make sure that what we are learning is shared widely with the industry, but also with the researchers. So there are specific learnings that can be made based on what we found out. I think I will stop here, and looking forward for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Milan. I'm sure there will be some time for questions and answers, by the way. I think, Clara, perhaps you'd like to react to what you just heard, especially the part on how private actors, the tech industry, can work with others, including the fact-checking community. How do you see that from your perspective, and the progress, and perhaps, some of the things you'd like to raise?
Sure. Well, first of all, we all know that disinformation is anything but new. But today it has become like a regular tool in political campaigning. Like, we should not forget that the term fake news was actually popularized by Donald Trump. So of course we have disinformation to expect in the context of European elections. And actually, if any kind of coordinated campaign is happening, it already started. So as we said, maybe we are already too late. It's still time to do something and take action. But yeah, we should not forget that some disinformation around main European topics are already circulating. For example, we've seen in the context of Gilets jaunes in France, of the Franco-German treaty, for example, on migration. So we all know about main topics that might be subject to disinformation in the context of European elections: migration, EU budget, and so on and so forth. Yeah, also I think that we should not forget that it is not a national election. It's about 27 national elections with different languages, different political landscapes, different contexts. And I think that in the past months we have learned a lot of lessons with previous elections. For example, in Brazil, we've seen that WhatsApp has been used a lot for circulating disinformation. So I know that Facebook has taken some actions regarding circulation of information on WhatsApp, but this is a very difficult area because it's encrypted discussions, and maybe it's a new area that we might monitor a little bit more. Also, other networks, like we can think also about Facebook groups in the context of the Gilets jaunes movement, which were used a lot to circulate disinformation, or memes, like pictures, which are also very difficult to monitor and flag in the context of the US 2016 elections and midterms. So yeah, this is some things that we might pay attention to, and yeah, I think that the world will be also watching at us. I mean, we have this code of practice. I think this is a great step. This is a great move towards more cooperation between different actors, platforms, policymakers, regulators, but also the civil society. And I think that just as the EU has set a new framework with the GDPR, I think that other actors might look at us at what we will be doing for the European elections. And in terms of cooperation, I think that platforms have taken a number of action with the code of practice. We've seen more transparency on political ads. I think that there is also an effort to support fact-checking. So there has been a wake-up call in the past years, and I think that we're on our way forward, but we still lack, I think, more cooperation with civil society. Having a repository of online ads, I think it's great. Each of the platforms have committed to more transparency on the ads and targeting, which is great, but maybe we should share information a little bit more. I think that the focus is still now on big actors, big platforms, but disinformation happen also across a number of different networks, more underground networks sometimes, like Reddit, like also the Russian social network VKontakte, for example, that we should also pay attention to. Because most of the time also disinformation can start in such networks and then go on more mainstream media. So yeah, I think that we should cooperate maybe a little bit more with the civil society, access data, good access to data for extensive research, cross-platform research. Having a common repository of political ads across platform would be a great help, I think, in this sense. Yeah, so maybe I will stop there and we'll continue the discussion maybe later.
I think we will, definitely. I'd like to ask you, Jens, to react perhaps on what you've heard, and if you could say something about how we can control disinformation without it producing negative externalities on freedom of speech and other fundamental rights. Perhaps you'd have some thoughts to share on this.
I think the answer is with great difficulty. This is really the crux of the matter. It is an extremely difficult thing to do. I think that so we have always, when we review technology and internet policies, their impact on free expression and access to information is always one of our top concerns. Like others, we have of course been really concerned about the threats to the information ecosystem that we have talked about. Given what we know about Russian interference in the US 2016 elections and information operations that are conducted, especially in Eastern European countries, it is absolutely right that European authorities, the Commission, member states should put in place a strategy, a response, and to try to meet this challenge in a rational way. And as I said, it's not easy because I think there's an expectation in some quarters and demand for quick fixes and quick results. And something I think the Commission strategy does right is to say that this is really a multifaceted problem. There are roles to play for private actors such as social media networks, internet platforms. There are parts to play for media organizations, for civil society, and for governments, for political parties. And so I think we're going to be dealing with this issue for years to come. And I think I have to say I think the Commission has done really well in terms of setting this off in the right direction. So we would commend you for that. As we looked at this process in the when the discussion began, and the term that was used was fake news, as you referred to. I think we're in a much better place now, because fake news was really used as a catch-all term to describe arguments that we disagree with and information that we would rather not have circulated, because it doesn't serve our political purpose, right? And so that cannot be the foundation of any sensible strategy. And so we were very happy to see the Commission's definition, working definition, focusing on verifiably false or misleading information created, presented, disseminated for economic gain or to intentionally deceive. I think that is really crucial, and it is also difficult, I think, as we move ahead to keep focus on that very, very tight and narrow definition. And it is extremely easy to veer into divisive political debate on difficult, toxic topics, and you mentioned some of them. Migration, EU budget. There will be different polarizing issues in different member states. In Spain, it'll be the Catalan issue. In France, you have the Gilets jaunes and other things going on, anti-Semitism right now. In the UK, there's Brexit, of course, and so on and so forth. It'll be a different picture in each and every country. Now, another point that we've made in when we have made observations on this issue is data and understanding the scope and the scale of what we're talking about, and I think, and that has been quite difficult. It seems to me to obtain really reliable data on the on how much disinformation is circulating in various European countries. It's really hard to tell, it seems, and I base that observation on information presented, I think, at the Commission's meetings, researchers from Oxford, the Reuters Institute, and so on, when they tried to measure the reach of disinformation on the internet and on social media networks. It was not a particularly easy thing to do, and it doesn't seem to be it wasn't like there was a deluge of evidence to say that this content was everywhere and sort of pervasive. The other thing that's really important to note is that this content, I think, is really difficult to identify often, and again, this is based on research that's been presented at the Commission's meetings, where people, when they are asked to identify disinformation, will often talk about superficial, sensationalist reporting, very biased reporting. Or even politicians' spin and PR and propaganda and so on, not actually fabricated news, which is what the definition is about. So I think this is. I think we are in a good place in this sense, because I think there's now awareness and there's vigilance, both in the private sector and public authorities. So people are now aware of these issues and vigilant. I think that's where we need to be, and I think we need to be careful as we move ahead, that we do not veer into the territory of suppressing legitimate political debate. That is really the key. So much more to discuss, but I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, this is a very good transition towards perhaps another part of the discussion that I'd like to have a bit more concretely. How can algorithms be used to combat disinformation? How can they be adjusted to an extent that they're not over-inclusive or under-inclusive? And I'd like to ask you, Milan, perhaps you could, from the perspective of Google, tell us how does that work in practice? What can you do?
Thank you. Well, we can do a lot, and we are doing a lot. Each year we are running hundreds of thousands of experiments on our algorithms, and we are rolling out thousands of changes of our algorithms, and each of the experiment and change is always tested against human reviewers. So we are really trying to make sure that the algorithms work in order to really serve people the right information. Now, Google has become successful because it was able to give people relevant information. So when someone was looking for something, we were able to serve relevant information. But what we learned over time was that the relevance is not always the key aspect. For specific searches such as civic issues and news, the relevance, which is based very often on speed, how quickly this information is provided, or other measures, the relevance is not the only measure. And we realized that by focusing on relevance, we made many mistakes. We were serving conspiracy theories on things such as flat Earth questions or Holocaust denial, and what we learned over time was that there is a certain group of queries and questions where we need to balance the relevance with authoritativeness of the sources. So this is what we are doing now, and what we've been gradually doing, and where we see a lot of improvement over time, both on search, on Google News, and other products on YouTube, is to stress the authoritativeness of the sources when people are looking for things such as, I mentioned, flat Earth theory. Before, if person typed a query such as "Is Earth flat?", the most relevant reply or the most relevant site would be someone denying the theory, or would be claiming that the Earth is flat. But what we need to do is to couple this with the authoritative source. So now, when someone types in "Is Earth flat?", the most likely hit would be NASA, for instance, so that people really see that. And this is also for instances such as breaking news, for instance, when there are evolving news. We saw that very often there were people sort of spreading misleading content, while the real journalists were still doing their work and trying to get the data and get the proper information on ground. So again, we are trying to make sure that people around the breaking news are being served relevant stories for authoritative sources. This applies to search, this applies to news. It also now applies to YouTube, so we are rolling out things such as top news and breaking news panels also on YouTube, just to make sure that really the authoritative sources, such as really well-established media, are the first ones, because previously we saw that the first hits were the websites with some just very quickly updated content, but very often misleading, and unfortunately this helped spreading misinformation about the breaking news. So there is a progress. It's an ongoing challenge, and something a challenge that we are taking very seriously. So I'm afraid that we all have negative experiences, but what we are trying to make sure that there is less and less, and really make systematic improvements, because we cannot really go case by case with the billions of sites out there. You cannot really go and correct individual things. You need to really build the algorithms so they are sort of future-proof. So this is what we are focusing on.
Yeah, and I think you're referring to something that is really challenging, which is whether you can detect on time something that is fake. And you've heard about deepfakes, those videos through which you can make anybody say something they didn't say, or to even create a character from scratch that doesn't exist. And you talked about journalists as well a little bit. People still see them as those that should be the ones detecting fake news and countering fake news, as compared to online social media networks and national regulators. But this is hard for them because they cannot be on top of everything. But when you look at deep fakes, something that comes up online, you can run some statistical analysis to detect it, but if that happens 24 hours before the election is, let's say, within 24 hours, that may be too late already. And this is really what's going on online. This is really hard to catch up with, how quickly and how easy those new media can be put online. And how does regulation come into that? Because we often hear that technology moves faster than the economy itself and regulation. How do you see the right approach in regulation from your perspective when it comes to such complex issues online?
I suppose the question is for me.
Yes. Sorry.
The choice that the Commission has taken in this phase is clearly in favor of a self-regulatory approach. Regulate disinformation, it is extremely challenging. There are member states that have taken steps in that direction. You know, Macron has supported a new law that deals with disinformation. But of course, question remains about the effectiveness of the regulatory approach, particularly in view of the fact that if you want to build in the necessary safeguards to protect freedom of expression, freedom of speech, you need to go through a system of authorization by a judge, which may be very fast, but at the same time, we always intervene at the moment where a certain narrative has become already viral on the internet. So the question is, what is the most effective tool that we can actually implement in order to tackle this challenge, which is, if you react ex post, you risk simply to get there too late when the damage is already made. If you want to act in a preemptive manner, you need to have an approach where the involvement of all the actors is necessary, but the involvement of all the actors can be achieved only through voluntary compliance with certain principles, so on a self-regulatory basis. We are experimenting ourselves. Google is experimenting changes in their algorithms. We are in the Commission experimenting in this moment in time a self-regulatory approach, which we hope will deliver the result that we expect. At the end of the year, we will see whether how far we have got. We look at this evolution with a very open mind, but also with the awareness that if the results are not there at the end of the day, we need to devise other instruments that come within the realm of the co-regulation, if you see what I mean, which should be there to strengthen the cooperation that we require, in a way, from the private sector, and to make it more stringent, more rigorous, or faster, simply faster. There is, when we talk about regulatory approach, there is a number of issues, and I would like to react also on the question that you asked me before. The question is about the funding. You mentioned two figures. The fact that now there is more resources available for the rapid alert systems, from 1.4 to 5 million to finance, to strengthen basically the institutional capabilities within the EU to have a stronger, strategic communication teams within the Commission, within the EU. This is only one part of the investments made. The other investments are made both in tools and infrastructures, and those are investments that are carried out under the Horizon 2020 program. Then I would like to underline that, because we are talking about artificial intelligence, we are talking about technologies that can help to deal with the issue of disinformation, and I would like to recall that under the program H2020, the Commission has started to invest money on research and innovation projects. There is a number of projects that are developing, they have developed and they're still developing tools to identify content, to analyze the networks, to better understand information cascades, to better capture the sentiment that prevails on different platforms, and those tools, I could list the names. There are about around 10 projects among those who have already concluded and those who are still ongoing, that represent an investment of around 25 millions. Then there is the investment in infrastructures. What we are trying to build, it is a digital service infrastructure that should link up fact checkers, researchers, and civil society in order to have a much more efficient way to exchange information and also to coordinate responses, which are not driven by the governments, which are not under the control of any public authorities, but simply are the result of independent investigations that come from the media, that come from the fact checkers, that come from the research world, and which are carried out in total autonomy, and therefore can represent also different point of views that recreate pluralism or pluralistic approaches to corrections, to false narratives that emerge online. And for that we have been investing already 1.5 million to create a prototype platform, which is called SOMA, that is start to be operational, and that pilots the first experience of collaborations between fact-checking organizations and universities. And there will be further investments during the year in the order of 2.5 million to create a DSI, a secure platform, where these experiences of collaboration across disciplines and across specializations can be scaled up. It is important to underline one thing. When we talk about civil society and the role of the civil society, of course, everybody thinks about fact checkers, it thinks about the media. There is also, however, NGOs that are specialized in specific fields. There are NGOs that deal with the immigration issues. There are NGOs that deal with the climate change issues. There are NGOs that deals with health issues. They are all topics that are extremely relevant because they are those which are mainly polluted by those groups or individuals that try to create confusion in the public opinion, in the spirit of the readers, by leveraging on topics that are very close to the heart of the citizens, or in any event, they have been instrumentalized politically in order to shift the opinion from one side to another. So these NGOs very often are developing their own fact-checking activities. They look at what happens online, they look at how the public opinion has been kind of diverted from one to another narrative, and they are active but very much isolated still within their own ambit, with their own member states, with their own specialization. So the idea of to create an infrastructure that links up the civil society organization has also to be seen in function of this additional source of control, verification, and observation of the online sphere for public discourse, which are the NGOs. This is one point that should be further developed, I think, in the next weeks and months. And final point I would like to make is about the changes in the algorithms that indeed we see from the reports on the implementation of the code of practice, that all the signatories are doing their work to provide users with better content, relevant but at the same time more authoritative content. Indeed, there is progress that is more visible in certain services. Now, Milan, you are here with us, and therefore I will talk about Google and not about the rest, but it is a constructive comment. You see that the search results in Google search are indeed have changed in terms of ranking of the search results. You see in Google News that the same applies. On YouTube, there is still some doubts whether or not On YouTube, there's not only the search function, there is also the recommendation function, what you see as recommended videos once you have carried out your own research. So the research can be very relevant, can be very, you mentioned the flat earth and the NASA that comes now first in the search result on YouTube. But at the same time, you have the recommendation that follows. And when you start to click in this recommendation, there are studies that suggest that still the tendency, it is, if you follow the recommendation streams, that you fall into more and more extremist type of content, in a kind of built-in bug that would bring the readers inevitably towards more extremist type of content, and therefore you fall back into conspiracy theories and flat earth, to remain an example, theories when you look about this type of information. So there is also a request that comes from the civil society. Avaz, as you know, it's very much engaged in this campaign that tries to find a better level playing field between publishers of news and online platforms, with the idea how the duty to correct can be implemented in the online space, taking into account that the role of the platforms is not the one of the publisher, but still it is a role where, you know, you by recommending the content, you in any event organize the manner in which the content is distributed. And therefore, as a distributor, what is your role in terms of providing the readers or the viewers with corrections when you know that certain viewers and readers have been exposed to certain specific disinformation campaigns? What are the so there is a further research to be made, I think, in that domain.
I just have a question regarding. Do you have any plans to tackle lobby action in the European Commission? Because we know that, well, I don't think there's such thing as a flat Earth lobby in the Commission. You mentioned climate change, and surely there are a lot of private interests which might pass information that can be somewhat biased to politicians in the European Commission. And that's part of the disinformation, isn't it, as well? And I was wondering if there's any plans to tackle that part of the problem.
I think,
So can I just say that we went outside of the definition, right? We're talking about, if you're a lobbyist, what you produce is biased information. You produce information for a certain purpose. Anyway, just making that point.
Sure.
Before we move on.
No, for sure, and that is exactly what I wanted to say. I mean, the lobbyists are an essential driver of policy making. I mean, we listen to interest groups in order to have the feeling of what the society thinks about issues. So you mentioned climate change. The point is that the Commission always strives to listen to different point of views, right? The problem of disinformation is when the public opinion has been distorted in their ideas that have been at a certain time, at a certain moment in time, influenced by false narratives, and this public opinion acts as ultimately as the final check and balance for policy making. So we need to cater for what the public believes to be the right response to societal challenges. And if the public opinion is not being duly informed, then it's a problem, because and that is not a question to be more attentive to one lobby rather than another one. It is a question then to confront the policies that you believe to be well balanced with the public opinion whose ideas, whose opinions are not being formed in a context where all the views had the possibility to reach the audience in an equal manner. So the disinformation is something that affects public policy making in a sense that condition the choices from the outside. So I will not see the risk as an internal risk of certain lobbies being more prominent than others, but rather as a policy making resulting into proposals that are not understood by citizens. That is more.
But there are some studies published by this or that companies, which results can be very biased regarding how harmful or not harmful some product is or whatever. And that is, in fact, online disinformation as well. Or
Well,
be perceived as such.
well, let's be very careful. I would invite really here to be very cautious, because on certain areas, you know, that even scientific evidence is never completely white or completely black. What is important is that the different views and what is true today can be false tomorrow. What is false today can be proven true tomorrow. So the truth is something that evolves over time, right? The flat Earth was considered to be the official truth a few centuries ago now. So, but that was true. The point is the possibility that is given to the different point of views to have the same prominence and visibility in this new information space that is increasingly used, particularly by young people, which is the online, which is internet, which is the online platform.
Thank you very much for your question. And just to keep the discussion going, I wanted to come back to a couple of things that Paolo mentioned. And I'm pretty sure each of our panelists would have something to react to. But I'd like to ask you, Clara, could you comment on what was said on changing algorithms and the role of that and the impact of that, and perhaps other tools and solutions or to complement algorithms could you suggest? And also what Paolo said about the fragmentation of the fact-checking community. Again, from what you do every day with the EU Disinfo Lab, perhaps you'd like to comment on that as well.
Sure. Well, when we talk about disinformation, very often there is this parallel with the health and considering disinformation as a virus. So maybe we can say that AI algorithms somehow, do they have like spread the virus? I'm not sure, but certainly they contributed to it. Like social networks and artificial intelligence algorithm contributed to the spread of disinformation. They're not the cause, I think, but they contributed to the spreading of disinformation. And then for the use of AI to combat disinformation, I think it is a very useful tool, but we should keep in mind that we need a very human-centric approach. I mean, just as Milan said, algorithms are a tool, but human should be kept in the loop at any time. But still, there are very useful projects and tools to help combat disinformation. For example, we were just mentioning EU projects and EU financing. So we are part of a EU project called We Verify, which is aimed at building a sort of a Swiss knife for verification tools for journalists and then also for the public. So be it for video verification, for example, content verification, so different tools. And also ultimately to have a database of already fact-check and debunk content in a blockchain that could be shared instantly to the public requesting for such information. So that, for example, is an example of technology and AI to be used to detect and to correct disinformation. Now, I don't know what your next question was also on the fact-checking.
Community of fact-checkers.
Yeah, so AI, for example, can be a tool for the fact-checking community. Then I don't know if the community of fact-checkers is fragmented. I wouldn't say that. But I think there is a whole move now towards more fact-checking. I think that most of the main newsrooms are now building their fact-checking capability, which is great. There is also this support from the Commission to a fact-checking network. And I think that we will see a number of fact-checking initiatives that are now preparing for the European election. For example, the International Fact-Checking Network is preparing a project around the EU elections, so which is great. Now, I think that we tend, and the civil society in general, and all of us actually tend to work a little bit in silos. Like we think in terms of policy making, we think in terms of responsibility of the platforms of fact-checking, but I think that we should be very careful to pass information between all of us. We should have a continuous dialogue between us. because fact checkers need also technology, fact checkers need the support from the platforms, researchers need access to data from the platforms, and so on and so forth. So we all need to really work together. And I think it is very important. And for that, regarding the EU Code of Practice, I think that the next step after the EU elections, of course, will be to carefully assess how it has been implemented and how we can move forward to our more co-regulation or maybe just regulation also on some aspects of the issue. With maybe more clear indicators and clear assessment, clear regulation, clear assessment from the regulators and the policymakers, which I think for the moment is still a bit unclear how it will be monitored by who and by which regulators. Yes, I think that at least at EU level we should, or we might regulate, for example, on access to data at some point. I think that the EU level is the right level for such a regulation. Also, maybe we might need to consider at some point the liability of the platform. What is the status of the platforms? Are there curators of information? I know there is this whole debate. Are there editors, or what is their legal status? So maybe this is something that we might need to think again about in the next years, in the next months. I don't know. And but we should not forget also the local and national level, because we are here in Brussels. We are talking about what we can, the Commission can do, what we can do at EU level, which is great. But I think that just as Paolo correctly mentions, NGOs and civil society or organizations on the field, on the ground, also know best what's going on in their region, in their language, in their country. On their topic. So I think we should carefully listen to them. And for me, at least, this is mostly on the national and local level that action could happen. Support to civil society, support to more local initiatives. Media literacy should also happen on a more granular level. And I think we should not forget about that. There are two levels: the EU levels and the national and local level also should not be forgotten.
Thank you, Clara. And I think you touched again upon a couple of issues that I really like to discuss in general, that the digital literacy, how important it is to raise awareness, to empower users to be able to verify their own content, and also who should be the judge of the truth, and what are the roles and the responsibilities again of each actors. Perhaps, Jens, you'd like to add a comment based on everything you've just heard over the last minutes, because there's been quite a few things that's been discussed.
Sure. So just on the role of algorithms, I think it's undoubtedly true that the way social media platforms have been set up have been factors in accelerating content that we would classify as disinformation. This was shown in research conducted by US universities. I think the factor was 6. So they conducted a study showing that disinformation would travel 6 times faster than other information, and so this has to do with the way that this content is either extremely provocative and something that antagonizes you as a reader, or you are extremely happy to see it and you want to share it with your friends. So it engages you emotionally, and that feeds that is what speeds up the sharing of that type of content. And so I think so efforts to rejig those systems to make more accurate, more balanced, more let's say sensible information, have that rise higher in the content feed is definitely necessary. And so another thing I would say is that so we looked at our organization CDT did a paper on the limits of automated social media content analysis. It's a little more than a year ago, and we looked at, and we did this because we felt there was this push from government authorities in particular to say to the technology sector, well, just put technology on it and make it go away. And so we thought that is a dangerous path potentially, and because it increases the risk of over censorship and overbroad restriction of legitimate content that should not be removed. And so some of the conclusions that we came up with are, as you said, human verification is essential. Tools can recognize with great accuracy certain pieces of content. Certainly they can do that, but they cannot necessarily determine whether that content is legal or illegal, whether it would classify as disinformation or something else, because that requires understanding of context. It takes a lot of nuance and judgment to work out, whether that content should be removed or not. And so that, I think that's something that we've learned, and I think people are now basically, I think that is the consensus more or less, that we need this combination of technology tools and human verification. I think what technology certainly can do is, it cannot define what is legal, what is illegal, what is true, what is false necessarily. But what it can probably do is understand patterns in how content is spreading. So, as I think you alluded to, if there is suddenly a surge of a particular type of content coming out of a set of accounts that can be linked back to, let's say, an intelligence agency somewhere, that is extremely important. That will tell you that there is something going on, and that the platform needs to be vigilant. So I'll stop there on the algorithms and technology side. Thank you.
Thank you, but I think some people want to continue on that. So perhaps Milan, I see you had a burning reaction.
Just yes, thank you. Just a couple of remarks here, specifically on the YouTube side. One important thing is that YouTube is a specific platform which is very different than search and the news, for instance. It's a user-generated content platform, and this really determines what kind of content you can find on that platform. And it is also evolving. Originally, the goal of YouTube was really just like to motivate people to spend time on YouTube. This is evolving, and now the goal is really to motivate people to spend the quality time on YouTube. And this also influences how we are changing the algorithms on YouTube. That these changes do take time, and I understand that when we are talking about disinformation, very often we don't have the luxury of having the time, which is why we are also trying to combine these with the faster fixes, such as the ones that I mentioned, the top news, the breaking news, also adding some information panels on specific publishers. But again, this is a continuous development that also generally applies to the code of practice as such. These things need time to prove themselves. And on the side of the criticism that we are hearing, of course we are listening, and we are very much engaging in conversations with those that are pointing out to findings they've made, be it Avaz, be it Mr. Chaslot, former engineer who is also pointing out to some issues. So we are engaging in these discussions with them on a very personal level, but very often we see that the evidence does not always draw a complete picture. So we are trying to really make sure that, again, the changes that we are doing are sort of future proof. And but one specific thing when it comes to YouTube is as long as it's a user-generated platform, what we are facing sometimes is the lack of this authoritative content. Not many news sources or publishers are publishing or creating videos for YouTube. So what we are trying to do is also to provide tools to publishers so that they can create videos on YouTube. So we are helping them to build this authoritative quality content that we can serve, because if we don't have this content, then we cannot really serve it. And for instance, we are also blocking or limiting the recommended videos for specific types of information. So just saying that what might have happened year ago or a couple of years ago has already been fixed, or we are working on fixing that. And just two more remarks on the virus analogy and the AI. This is what Google News is one of the good examples where we are using AI heavily in terms of improving the results. Basically, the way Google News work right now is really AI sort of breaks down all the text, it analyzes the text, and it helps the ranking. So there are areas where AI works. It's also because Google News has a limited corpus of publishers that are allowed. So it's not dedicated to all. And again, I think that the media literacy is a extremely important aspect that we are investing into, and we are working with partners. And again, we appreciate the work of the Commission and other partners, because this is something we cannot really do alone. And as Jens was mentioning, we don't really know how much disinformation is out there. It's very difficult to measure. But putting this aside, how much types of or sources of disinformation is out there, what we need to build the resilience towards it. We need to work with users so they really understand how to identify it. Work with fact checkers who are helping, who are the gatekeepers, not gatekeepers, but those that are helping to identify it. And one specific area where the media literacy needs to take place as well are the when we are talking about elections, are the candidates and the political parties themselves, because sometimes they are spreading disinformation very voluntarily. Sometimes they are not even aware. Sometimes they are not aware about the tools how they can fight this. So what we are doing right now is providing trainings to candidates and political parties. So for instance, they can claim their own information panels on search, so that it cannot be hijacked, so that they can make sure that when you're typing a name of a candidate, they will be the first to serve the basic information about them and their website. So it's not going to be a disinformation website. So they can protect their websites against cyber attacks, which is one of the areas that is not a topic of today. But these things are very much interconnected. So the media literacy is really, it sounds very much like a cliche, but it's extremely important.
Thank you, Milan. And I have, before we move to questions and answers, because we really want to do that, right? I'd like to ask you, Paolo, when can we expect the next report to be published on the progress of the signatories in the context of the Code of Practice?
Normally, beginning of next week.
Okay, great. And how do you view this year in light of the elections and the progress that's been made?
But the only thing I can say at this stage is that the policy are relevant and good, I think. If you look at Google, you look Facebook, Twitter, I mean, they set up a number of policies, they have made it public, and in theory, they are good. Now, are they implemented all over Europe? At which pace? How we can measure the actions that concretely have been taken in the implementation of these policies? For that, I mean, this is a pending call to get better and better metrics and benchmarks to understand how effective it is, how efficient is the implementation of these policies, which I repeat, they are designed in a proper manner, or in a very pragmatical manner, which is important because it's a learning curve for everybody. This exercise has to go through tries and sometimes errors in order to get better and better. But at the same time, you know, we need data. We need quantitative elements on the basis of which we can actually establish that there is a massive effort that is deployed by the platforms in the direction of the good implementation of these policies.
Yes, and I think all stakeholders have a common objective, and this is, what brings them together that matters in trying to advance this progress as fast as possible.
Perhaps one point I would like to underline, however. Sorry if I interrupt you, because
Your horses.
just one point. It's about something that has mentioned before, the access to the data, which is not only the provision of metrics on the implementation in the various member states of the policies in question. It is also, there is a risk that when we talk about fact-checking, when we talk about those who have the task, the difficult task to establish whether something is a news is factually correct or not, is to leave the question, which is the real elephant in the room, about who is the arbiter of the truth at the end of the day. And that it is a question that is very much hinging upon a conception where, what we are trying to achieve, it is to find out whether or not a certain news item is true or false, and then to establish the ranking of that individual item in the various news feed or search results, depending on the type of services that the different signatories of the code are providing, in function of what has been found as credible or not credible on an instance by instance basis. I'd like to underline that the work of fact checkers is one of the phases which is necessary but not sufficient. We need to understand where the disinformation happens, in which type of information areas, which are the themes that, and I agree very much with you, member state by member states or linguistic area by linguistic areas are more prominent in these different cultural and political environments. But then we need to do something else. We need to understand what are the patterns and trends behind it. We need to define the sources. We need to understand what are the mechanisms that are used in order to amplify or to accelerate the spread of this information. And for that, you need tools that looks not only at the veracity of the content, but also at the information cascades and the manner in which the information is spread online. The work that the platforms are doing is very important. They try to have more neutral algorithms. But let's not forget that it's important to have access to data in order to understand how the bad actors out there are using the vulnerabilities that will always be there in this platform to push and to spread their own information campaigns across the net. And for that, we need to have access to data. We need to have independent researchers that study the information cascades and how the different actors organize themselves in order to amplify the reach and the speed of these narratives. Access to data is going to be a real issue that we need together with the platforms. It's a nut that we need to crack.
Thank you. Clara, you wanted to please briefly.
Yeah. Okay, very quickly. Well, I couldn't agree more on what you just said about access to data, and I think you wanted to mention media literacy at some point. So I just have a quick comment. Like, so Milan, you talk about YouTube and the algorithm and how YouTube now is trying to change the recommendation. I think the problem here is also that we rely on the objectives of a few companies. I mean, it's great, this change in the mindset and the algorithms of Google and YouTube. But yeah, for a moment, we want to keep you on the platform as long as possible, and the day after, we prefer that you have access to qualitative content. So we rely only on the decision of a few companies. So for me, it's also a problem, and I think that users here should also be empowered to have a choice, to have a say also on that, and also held companies accountable for what they see. For that, I mean, for example, that you could have a few plugins on your web browser, for example. I think that already Mozilla, for example, committed to release a new version of the Firefox browser with a few add-ons and a few settings helping you to check on the content that you are seeing. We've seen a number of initiatives in this area. For example, you have this plugin NewsGuard, which helps you detect like the the reliability of a news source. You also have a number of other plugins like Who Targets Me, which helps you monitor how you have been targeted on Facebook. So this is also related to the AI issue that we were discussing today. So I think that we should definitely also, as users, and be responsible and hold the companies accountable for what we see online. And we mentioned, the news search. And Google News and also a bit YouTube, but I think we are missing Google Chrome here because the browsers are our first window, our first entry to the internet, and I think that they can also be a useful tool for us to monitor what's going on there. And this is also very much related to media literacy, because if you teach people how to verify the sources, how to use social media and so on, you should also empower them to be able to check what they see.
This is not fake news. We're gonna have questions and answers, but
sorry about that.
Very, very quickly. I think it all boils down to transparency, and I think we all agree that transparency is extremely important. And I dare saying that Google is one of the really leaders in cloud when it comes to transparency. We started publishing transparency reports years ago on the law enforcement requests. We are publishing now transparency reports on YouTube removals of videos, and we are looking into more and more ways how to publish more data and how to publish the data, but in a sort of useful manner. Here there's a couple of there's at least I can see one caveat or two caveats. It takes time. It takes time really to learn how to provide the data, how to contextualize it, to make it really useful, because just throwing a lot of data out is not always the best way. Also, and there's the second caveat, is that we've seen before that when we are publishing data, they can be used by those that are trying to game the systems. The first time we published a seminal paper on our ranking algorithms, we see a huge spike of attempts to game the system. People selling and buying links to each other from each other because they knew that this is the way how to game the system. So we need to be very, very careful in this sense as well. And there are also some privacy concerns and others. So transparency, absolutely, and we are doing our best. It again needs some time and needs some cautious. And the plugins, yes, well, Chrome also allows NewsGuard. We are talking to the owners. They are very often in Brussels and talking to all stakeholders. I installed it on my Chrome myself. One of the issues that I can see, for instance, with NewsGuard, and again we are allowing it on our platforms, is something that Paolo pointed out to. It only works in English. So there, it only works for English sources and only on the US sources. Not even all the UK publishers are covered. So there are plugins, and plugins are definitely one of the very efficient ways. And I think that Chrome is very open, and many plugins are available. But again, the media literacy and getting the information out is a very part of this puzzle.
Thank you, Milan. Now let's confront you guys to public opinion. I know this hand at the back was raised a couple of times, so we'll take a few questions from you all. Please stand up, speak loudly, because I'm not sure we have a microphone, and tell us your name and perhaps your organization if you like. First one here? Yes, at the back.
red tape and bureaucracy and paperwork involved in it. For young entrepreneurs, innovators, it's very, very hard to access to these resources. So all the giant tech companies, all the bigger institutions are accessing them. Do you have any program for that to ease us? And Clara, thank you very much for mentioning plugins. But do any of you know any plugin that doesn't work this way on mobile, like for mobile devices, for smartphones? Because usually when we read our news are on mobile devices, usually not on desktop. Do you know any tablet or mobile plugin for fact checking or fake news? Thank you.
Thank you. Question at the back, perhaps?
Yes, I have a question for Milan.
Stand up.
How are you determining the authoritativeness of a source? I was curious about that. And how are you ensuring like representation of minority views, especially on civic rights issues?
Any other question? We'll come back to you guys later as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning. Nadia Kovalchikova from the Alliance for Secure and Democracy at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. My question is about the vulnerabilities and the accountability. Paolo, you mentioned that vulnerabilities will always exist. My point is maybe if the accountability arises, maybe we will have less vulnerabilities. So I wonder, have you kind of discussed if the accountability is higher for the social media platforms, or let's say the consequences of letting the disinformation being spread on social media platforms? Do you think that that might also decrease the viral spreading of disinformation as such, to give them more responsibility to not allow that to happen? And also at the EU level, have you thought of alternatives to Facebook, a European alternative? Because at the moment we are just trying to deal with what we have, but what about the more proactive approach and thinking, could there be another platform like that to give options for citizens?
Thank you. One last question. Yes, the man in the blue suit.
Thank you. My name is Mikko Salo. I had a chance to participate at a high-level group on contributing to the work at the time. There's many things I could comment, but basically one is just this was a very reassuring that things are happening and that's very good and all that, but just to remind the audience as well, the European Data Protection Supervisor organized quite an alarmist seminar last Monday that's online as well, and there we are really going through the structures and it's from the privacy point of view. And it's actually exactly the same theme. I mean, so we are doing a kind of short-term things here, but that's a big issue as such. And this leads then to, there's a lot of talk about the civil society involved, and I was representing civil society as well, and fact-checking and media literacy. But there we have a structural problem that we actually hinted in our report, that we need to somehow like have a clearinghouse for truly funding. I mean, even the Horizon Europe might be too clumsy for that type of things. If the platforms are really serious, I mean, they are investing a lot of money on that one, then it has to be done so that it's pooling resources. Now we see actually that Facebook and Google are actually involved with everything, journalistic and media literacy, very much in fact-checking, and that creates a problem for trust that we should all kind of empower as such. So just the kind of structural solutions for the funding things to come. A little challenge for Paula and the comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent questions. I'd like to start with you, Milan, because I think there were a couple of questions for you. Would you like to take the...
Yes. Well, thank you for all those questions. I think you touched upon many important issues. On the technology and the context, I think, and you pointed out to tools that are already out there, the technology is improving and it's getting better and better, but we are still not there yet. That's the basic answer. We see improvements in many ways, such as detecting vile extremist content and detecting hate speech. But then we always see that there still needs to be the sort of human oversee, because these tools simply make many mistakes, and the margin of error is just too large when it comes to such important societal issues such as hate speech or violent extremist content or disinformation. So on the second point, the sort of combination of different tools and different techniques, absolutely. We have specific teams at Google dedicated, and even within Alphabet, dedicated to to different AI machine learning techniques. We keep them separated on purpose because we feel that but they interact a lot, because different tools can be used for different issues or different products, and really the where we see where the magic happens is when they are meeting and working together. And we are trying to be, again, very transparent and publishing a lot of research and data via TensorFlow and other tools. And since I understand that you are very much involved in this topic, I don't probably need to tell you that. On the applications, very good point. I don't have specific examples on my mind right now. What we are trying to do is to provide, for instance, the fact check labels to search and use, and this is available also on mobile. So it's built in directly in the tools. So when the fact checkers are using these labels, users can see it both on their desktops or on their mobiles. But I'm pretty sure there are great applications, and I think we will see more and more. And even our colleagues, for instance, from Jigsaw, which is one of the parts of Alphabet, are looking into building applications for mobile that would be tackling disinformation or security, because these are the main concerns of them. On determining the authoritative sources, again, very good question. There are a couple of ways how we are doing this. We have raters, we have the algorithms, and the ranking systems are sort of using different metrics. You can find a lot of information online. Again, there's a website called How Search Works that really in detail describes how exactly we are doing these things. There are the reviews guidelines, so that the human reviewers who are helping to sort of check the algorithms. All the guidelines are available online. You can download them, you can go through them, and we are even testing the human reviewers on a continuous basis just to make sure that they are really following those guidelines and that they are acting in a neutral way. I think I answered. Or on the trust, absolutely. It's an ongoing issue, but I think we would spend hours. So I'm not sure whether there was a specific question for us. Indeed, it could. The way we are looking at this is not by, for instance, working directly with fact checkers, but we are working with the International Fact Checking Network, which is an independent body that gathers the fact checkers, that also reviews whether they are applicable. So these are, for instance, the ways how to make sure that we go sort of beyond. But I think we are also, again, very transparent in terms of who we are funding, how much money we are spending. We are publishing the transparency report, the lobby transparency report. So I think the transparency is the tool. I think that in principle it is important to support research, to support civic society, and it is also important to make sure that there are no strings attached.
The name of an excellent movie, by the way. Paolo, would you like to react to the red tape question?
Yes, indeed. I mean, if you want to apply for EH 2020 funding, you need to go through a quite heavy paperwork. That is true. On the other side, there are a lot of money involved, and the need to have a transparent and objective manner to select the projects. It is equally necessary. Otherwise, we would be facing another type of criticism, which is chronism or preference given to some kind of usual suspects. So we need to have a system in place which is indeed, I recognize, heavy from the bureaucratic point of view, but at least has some guarantees of objectivity in the moment of the evaluations of the project and the selection of the beneficiaries. Concerning the field that we are talking about today, so the projects that I could name a few: Social Sensor, Invid, Reveal, now the newer projects like We Verify, and Provenance, Co-Inform, SOM, and so on and so forth. If you look at the composition of the consortia there, you see that there is some companies, particularly from the media sector, that are large in size, but the majority of the participants are either small, medium-sized companies or mid-caps at the best. Particularly from the technological point of view, if you look at the technology providers for these projects, are more or less within the ambit of mid-caps, not large companies. This lead me, and what we try to do, indeed, is to kind of make the community, the stakeholders community, aware of the orientations for the future research and innovation programs, work program, a bit in advance. We have the proposer days, of course. This is a classic moment in which everybody goes, but there are also hints that are provided, like today, about what are going to be the directions for future investments, that prepare the ground for stakeholders attentive like you to think about how to get organized when the call will be published. And that links up to the question that you asked before. So what about investment in initiatives, in projects that could represent an alternative to the current incumbents? Well, you'll see in the you'll see in the next work program H2020 for the year 2020 that there will be some money devoted to consortia that can propose platforms using the technologies that are based on blockchain, on artificial intelligence, and that can propose new ways to organize the content, to aggregate the content through a stimulus that is provided to the editors, to the producers of audiovisual content, to get organized, to invent new ways to reach the public through services that indeed compete with the one that are prevailing today, or they create new market, new ways, complementary services, not necessarily head-to-head competition, but could be new ways to expand the market with new services that are the result of cooperations with content producers, including also user-generated content integrated into it. The problem here, and then we had the press club today, it is a bit always the same, and I make always this analogy. The news publishing, and it reminds sometimes of agriculture. And the attitude of news publishers are sometimes so much driven by their own silo approach, that imagine cooperation across outlets, it is almost unthinkable. And the same appeared, the same you see it in the agricultural sector, when the farmers complain about the excessive bargaining power of large supermarkets or hypermarkets, and they ask for a fairer playing field, with the regulator that should eventually fix the price for milk, let's say, right? Well, they do not see the other side of the medal, which is, but the market, it is open also for other forms of integration downstream in the value chain, where the aggregation can happen at a different level of this chain, but that would require a new spirit of cooperation across outlets. And we can provide money for creating the conditions, money in terms of infrastructural money. We do not intervene in the content, of course, but infrastructures that are harnessing new technologies for reaching out to wider audiences, and therefore to make this experiment more successful that would be otherwise without adequate technologies. But the rest, it is also for the media sector itself, to get mobilized, to invent new ways, new formulas that are really enticing and appealing to people. On the question of vulnerability, yes, and accountability, of course. The transparency that Milan was talking about is the first step towards a more accountable operation of online platforms. In order to have full accountability, however, the control of the vulnerabilities has to be also carried out by independent research. there must be an external overview of the systems that are in place and the manner in which the systems are exploited, in particular by bad actors, to orchestrate campaigns that very often takes the form and the shape of a disinformation campaign. To do that, the action plan proposed the creation and asked the member states also to get in motion to facilitate the creation of national centers for research around disinformation. Multidisciplinary teams that are independent, they are anchored into the academia, and then who can better look at the manner in which the conversations in the online space takes place in different services. Now, today it is quite easy to have an in-depth analysis of these conversations on Twitter, which is an open platform with an open API, and researchers are quite happy with the manner it works. It is not yet fully possible on Facebook, for instance, where even public pages are not searchable through API. And therefore, there you have, I don't want to quote Milan here, otherwise we start. But that is what I have in mind in terms of accountability. To enable independent researchers organized in a network that correspond to a kind of logic and structure and architecture, and therefore they're reliable, to have an independent overview on the trends and patterns of disinformation that happens, that develops on different services, on all main services, so has to constitute a check and balance which is effective in make the online platforms accountable for the manner in which their own system works. They are doing their part, but of course we need also an independent overview. And finally, the last question I think was about the founding of civil society organizations and the clearinghouse proposal that comes also from the high-level expert group that was discussed in the high-level expert group. Miko knows very well the problems to have direct funding to fact-checking organizations who do not want to be founded by public authorities in order not to compromise their independence and the perception also by the public of their own independence. So that it is quite of a tricky issue. I think there should be other source of funding like charities and foundations that should be looked at in this context. As regards the NGOs and the media literacy community, I mean, the good news is that we are really fighting to defend the proposals that the Commission has put forward for the next MFF. And in Creative Europe, there will be in the multi-sectoral strand of the Future Creative Europe program, there will be not immense, but our proposal is about 61 million on the period of 7 years of investment to be devoted to media literacy and to media pluralism.
Thank you. I wanted to give some more time to questions and answers and for Clara to answer the question, but I think we'll have to stop here, unfortunately. Please give a round of applause to our panelists and to yourselves. Thank you. Thank you very much for making the time, and we'll be in touch with the event recap, and the video will be online as well, so you can take another look at the talk. Thank you very much.